Yeah, so we had some good ones this time. Illusion of transparency, which yeah, and then expecting short inferential distances, and I feel like they actually would have been
Wait,
really
wait,
good
wait.
ones. Hmm?
Please, hold up just one second. Aren't we
Oh, are we on?
doing, what was it? Is molecular technology scientific and scientific evidence, legal evidence, rational evidence? Am I
Not
completely
according
off
to the
base?
website.
Oh, son of a bitch.
Should we like maybe?
We'll chop that. But no worries.
No, I mean, should we maybe like reconvene a different day? If we're
I can't. If this is going on Wednesday,
really?
I record. We want more tomorrow night. That takes from like usually 6 to 9. So.
Crap. You know what? No. I've read both of these a number of times. I know them all. Let's keep going.
All
right, you got it.
Yeah, so I was saying that we have some good ones this time. Illusion of transparency and expecting short inferential distances, both of which would have been really good to go along with talking to strangers, especially illusion of transparency. It's very much in line with the major themes of that book. Someone want to summarize it, or shall I go?
I think you're doing a great job so far. Go for it.
Okay, so illusion of transparency. In hindsight bias, which was the previous one, people who know the outcome of a situation believe that the outcome should have been easy to predict in advance. So related to this one is the illusion of transparency, which is we always know what we mean by our words, and we expect that others know too. I think I've also heard this called mind reading. I forget if that's from. I think that's a thought distortion on the list of like the CBT skills.
It also just sounds like a popular nomenclature for like this thing, right?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to read your mind? Well, I meant this when I said that, and the standard rejoinder is, how am I supposed to read your mind? You know, when all I could hear is what you said.
Yeah. Now let's well, I kind of want to dig into it more, but I'll keep summarizing. There was an example in here. So June recommends a restaurant to Mark. Mark dines there and discovers A, unimpressive food and mediocre service, or B, delicious food and impeccable service. Then Mark leaves the following message on June's answering machine. June, I just finished dinner at the restaurant you recommended, and I must say it was marvelous, just marvelous. And so this was a scenario that was presented to a group of subjects. And
I'm trying not to laugh. Sorry, it's a funny situation.
I know. Marvelous, just marvelous is a phrase that I should use more in my life. So
I think that'd be marvelous, just marvelous.
When this was presented to a group of subjects, 59% thought Mark's message was sarcastic, and that Jane would perceive the sarcasm, importantly. And among the other subjects, told scenario B, which, by the way, they're saying the ones who were told that he had unimpressive food thought that it was sarcastic and that Jane would perceive this sarcasm. And Jane, there's a typo. Maybe we should report it. Apparently, Jane and June are used interchangeably in this.
Oh.
But anyway.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, the subjects that were told scenario B, that he received great service and food, only 3% thought that Jane would perceive Mark's message as sarcastic. The study seemed to indicate that an actual voice message was played back to the subjects, which I guess is not clear. It seemed to indicate. And that makes it more surprising, though, that people could get such different impressions from a voice recording.
Yeah.
So,
I think it would be very important that it is a voice recording, because if it was just written down, you could, imagine the tone of voice to be whatever you wanted. But if there was an actual voice recording, everyone hears the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this, and it's illustrating a point that we don't necessarily have to generalize too much from this, the specific example, just because it's, one study and all that. But this general phenomena stands with or without this study. But as far as this goes too, large parts of like whether or not I'd assume it's being sarcastic would be my priors on Mark's usual like behavior, if he's a sarcastic person, if he's the kind of person who's ever used the word marvelous before, little things like that. But yeah, I think the gist is that if the group was told, hey, look, he's being sarcastic, or rather that the food is bad, they assume that he's being sarcastic. And of course, they would assume that they know that he believes the food was bad, but that they also believe Jane would perceive the sarcasm. And so what I like about this too is this was done in 1994. If you run that into text messages today, you get to just go completely hog wild with this.
Yeah. What emoji did they put? That's why it's really important to use emoji.
Is that a sarcastic wink or a serious wink?
Yeah.
There was another study he cites from 2002, which I thought was even more interesting because they told a person to say an ambiguous sentence to an audience. I think one of the examples given was the man is chasing a woman on a bicycle, and the speaker is given a picture to show that it's a man running after a woman, that the woman is on the bicycle, as opposed to like the woman is running and the man is on the bicycle. But when you first hear it, it could be interpreted either way. Anyways, they were told to say the sentence to an audience and estimate how much of the audience understood what they were saying. And they always overestimated how many people understood them and underestimated how many people misunderstood them. And like I thought that was extra interesting because then the speaker had full control over how they would utter the sentence, right? And they're looking at the audience, so maybe they're getting some kind of feedback from them, but they still just were wrong guessing on how many people actually understood them.
Yeah, and as we know from talking to strangers, you can't even trust what feedback you're getting from the audience.
Yeah.
So if you want to test this at home with your friends, I forget if I even heard this from the LessWrong community or somewhere else, but if you tap your finger on the table to like the tune of Happy Birthday or the Star Spangled Banner or some tune that you would expect people to know, and then ask them what song was that, nobody will know. It'll sound exactly like, I don't know, Jingle Bells to you or whatever, but it's
it's just random tapping.
A good example.
I remember Julia Gillett mentioning that once, like 5 years ago on Rationally Speaking, and I never forgot that. It's another good example of like, no, like this couldn't be more clear. I'm clearly doing Happy Birthday, and they're like, I don't know, man, you're tapping your fucking fingers. Is that AC/DC? Like,
okay. This is going to be a spoiler for Harry Potter Methods of Rationality. So if you haven't read it, skip forward 2 minutes. But Eliezer intended it to be incredibly obvious whether or not Quirrell was Voldemort, like he was in canon. And I'm not going to say if he is or not for people who didn't skip forward, but it is not at all incredibly obvious to the point where the community was, the readership at the time he was writing, was very much split as to whether or not Quirrell was Voldemort until the reveal was made later on near the end of the book. And like to Eliezer, he was just like, how are people not getting it? This is the most obvious thing in the world. There shouldn't even be a discussion.
In all of our defense, even if it was obvious, which I maintain that it was less obvious than he thought it was, but part of the reason for that is because, like, if anything, it was too obvious.
Yeah, it was
and there's no way it would be laid out that clearly if that's really what was going on here.
I agree, but it's a thing that happens a lot with writing, where you think the audience is going to get something and they don't, and then you overcorrect and like really overexplain things, and people are like, "Don't spill it out like I'm an idiot." I can read into the text a little bit. It's a very difficult line to walk.
Yeah, that's why beta readers are really important.
Yep.
That's what I'm appreciating a lot about wrapping up Ward right now, is that the author has, to tie all these loose ends together, and I think do it to the satisfaction of the raging mob. And the mob, at least the only mob that I see and listen to, which is like the subreddit and the Discord, they are, it's hard to summarize, but they're much more like, you picture mobby than like Reddit, where Reddit will just like, is happy just to fling shit across the fence. They'd be like, haha, this sucked or whatever. These ones will jump down your throat and be like, I can't believe you would say that, you would put heroic sacrifice on this pedestal. Really, it's just like suicide, and that's terrible, and this is awful. This shouldn't be, lauded or whatever. It's I can't. And Brian brought this up in the last couple of episodes of We Want More. Like having to write in front of an audience that is dissecting your work while it's in progress. I think would add a whole new dimension to it.
I can't even do it when I'm just trying to like have an imaginary audience. I end up second guessing myself. I'm like, is this too dark? Am I talking down to my audience right now? Is this going to be, I don't know.
Yeah. The post ends on a real world example with huge consequences where 2 days before Germany attacked Poland, kicking off World War II, Chamberlain sent a letter that was intended to make it clear Britain would fight any invasion that occurred. But it was phrased politely and in diplomatic speak, and Hitler thought it was conciliatory. So the tanks rolled right in.
Those polite Brits.
Yeah. So yeah, the main lesson from this post seems to be when you have something in your head, you may think things are very obvious, but they are not necessarily in any way obvious.
They very much are not.
The best thing about that is that you can never really be sure someone actually understood you. Like the premise at the top of this is like nobody knows. Like you know what you meant to say by your words, and you expect others to know it too. Sometimes if you're not 100% sure what you meant, then like that's obvious that the person probably won't know what you meant if you didn't. But even if you do, and they tell you back in words that make sense to you, you might have this kind of like double illusion of transparency, but that is like way less obvious than a like literal double illusion of transparency where, I just didn't communicate exactly as clear as I thought, and then you repeated my miscommunication to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. This can kind of go on to this weird recursive level that to me is just kind of fun and wild to chase down. But
well, there's two.
It is. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There's two different frameworks that I'm thinking of just off the top of my head, where people try to mitigate this effect. One is the CFAR's double crux communication style, and then there's also the Gottman-Rappaport intervention, which is a relationship counseling thing. And they both have the same kind of structure where one person speaks, the other listens, the other person has to repeat back what the other person said, but in their own words. Or like, what I'm hearing is that you feel like this, and that's making you feel that way, and I can see that you're upset about this by like your expression. Is that right? And you're not allowed to move forward until you feel convinced that the other person understands you. Like you feel like their ability to rephrase it back to you is, yeah, that's what I meant to say. Or I think with the double crux example, it's supposed to be like even kind of a steel man where it's like, yeah, that's even better than what I was trying to say. I guess that's the ideal version.
Yeah, that was in Rappaport's rules of like civil discourse or something. One of the 4 rules was you should be able to repeat back your opponent's argument in such terms that they say, wow, I wish I thought to put it that way. Mm. And I feel like if you get to do that is the apex of having a good conversation with somebody you disagree with. It shows, at the very least, that you understand them well enough to simulate what they're trying to say, and that means you're prepared to engage them. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's also, although I've tried to have these kinds of conversations, and it takes a lot of practice, and it's very unnatural. First of all, it makes any conversation take like a million times as long, so it's the reason why people don't just speak like that all the time.
Right.
I think, I don't know.
Well, and the other reason, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The other thing that I tried to do, which I've talked about before, is the radical honesty thing of, especially with people close to me, that, there's less inferential distance. It's like a segue.
I was going to do the segue too, yeah, but I wasn't going to use that one. I was going to say that I think that would work to resolve confusions like Mark and Jane were having about the restaurant, right? Because you could trust that Mark would accurately represent how he felt about the restaurant, rather than like, is he joking?
Yeah, like, is Mark a guy who's sarcastic all the time, or does he never make jokes? But most people are kind of in the middle of that. I don't know. I like to use radical honesty, say things clearly and bluntly, as much as possible.
Totally. And some of the times that the reason that we can suspect that short conversation will suffice where a long conversation is necessary because we expect short inferential distances.
Yeah, we should.
Can you believe I didn't write that down first? That was a good joke. I could hear the audience laughing, even if Enosh. All right, there. Finally, cracked a grin. All right.
Oh, geez, I'm sorry. There must be a long delay between when I'm doing things to when you're seeing them.
No, I'm giving you guys a hard time. That wasn't an uproarious laughter joke. Anyway, expecting short inferential distances is one of the ones I didn't have to reread, but I did just because it stuck with me really well when I first read it. The short version is that basically when you're explaining something to somebody, you have a well-grounded intuition that a short explanation will suffice. Because in our ancestral environment, short explanations were all that was necessary because we all basically had all the same prior knowledge. Whereas now, if you're trying to make a nuanced point in a difficult subject and you give a short answer, like a tweet, it's extremely reasonable to understand that somebody, or to expect now that someone will completely misunderstand what you're trying to say.
Yeah, like he gives the example that since you grew up in bands of no more than like 200 people maybe, all knowledge was passed down by speech or memory, and so like no one was that far removed from you in knowledge. If you discovered a new oasis, you didn't have to explain what an oasis is or why it's a good idea to drink water or anything. Like almost everyone knew almost everything that everyone else knew. There was not a lot of distance between you and other people that you had to bridge. And now we have what he calls abstract disciplines with vast bodies of carefully gathered evidence, generalized into elegant theories, transmitted by written books. Their conclusions are 100 inferential steps removed from universally shared background premises.
Yeah, we have really intense specialization and everything.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to get that out real quick before you went to the why something that's more than one inferential step away seems to be crazy or lies or something.
No, you're good. I brought up Twitter because it's always I'm not on Twitter, but I see tweets once in a while on Reddit, or I'll hear about the fallout sometimes. I don't know if Dawkins uses Twitter less or if he's just slightly less insane on there, but for a while he was just totally tanking his reputation, I think, by trying to have nuanced arguments in 140 characters. And now they've upped it, I think, to 280, so he was able to get out the whole sentence like, there's every reason to expect that eugenics would work from a scientific perspective, but that doesn't mean that we should do it or something. And
yeah, well, the thing is, like with Dawkins and with a lot of people, they just assume everyone knows basically the same thing that he knows.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's exactly the point.
I'm speaking to an audience of my fellow scientists here, right? And it turns out, no, with Twitter, you're speaking to literally everyone.
Yeah.
And most of them don't have that knowledge.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's nothing scientifically controversial about the fact that it would be super easy to breed in traits into people if you really wanted to, right?
Yeah.
If aliens visited Earth tomorrow and said, if humanity on average isn't a foot taller in 2 centuries, we will blow up your planet, that would be not, it would be an inconvenience. It would be hard, but it wouldn't be difficult. It wouldn't
be literally impossible. I'm not going to say that it would be like super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Yeah, right. So it might not be. It would be definitely an inconvenience, but it's not like we would have no idea how to address this challenge, right?
Yeah.
It would be totally doable. I'm not hung up on the eugenics thing. It's a very loaded word.
Yeah.
It was the idea that I think of is it always seems like Twitter people have, they try to make a nuanced point. That's what I was on Twitter for like one summer, and I got to argue with somebody about female and male genital mutilation, and I realized that we were just talking past each other, and that it was impossible to have a conversation. I'm like, this is the worst platform ever for talking to people. Why am I here? And then you get on there for like
Twitter.
Yeah, movie reviews, jokes, I think, is the absolute platform for it. You can get great one-liners and zingers on Twitter. I think that's a great place for it. But as for the rest of it, meh.
Twitter was a fun social experiment that we did with the world. And
yeah.
I guess
I'm not sure fun is the term I would use.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. I worked as a social media manager for a bit, and that was just like the worst 2 years of my life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an exaggeration. I have had worse things happen than having to be on Twitter, but it was up there.
Yeah.
Just like the inanity. I just like.
Yeah, so to go back to the post, it says that in the ancestral environment, anyone who said something with no obvious support was either a liar or an idiot, because there was no knowledge that everyone else in the band didn't already have.
Or couldn't easily get.
Yeah. And conversely, if you say something that you think is blatantly obvious and the other person doesn't see it, then that other person is an idiot, or they're being deliberately obstinate just to annoy you. And on top of all that, if someone says something with no obvious support and expects you to believe it and gets all indignant when you don't, then they must be totally crazy. So the issue of not having this common ground between each other is, a recipe for horribleness, because listeners still assume that everything should be visible with one step, maybe two, so they take 2 steps back to explain. Maybe 3 on the outside, and not realizing just how much distance there is from universal knowledge to new knowledge.
So this is so many professors, or just probably teachers in general, but I remember in college there would be like the sign of a good professor is somebody who understands inferential distance. I think a lot of teachers, like good teachers who care about the teaching process, are really skilled at this too. Like that's probably the field where you need to know it the most. Any field maybe where you're the main thing you're trying to do is communicate something to an audience that's unfamiliar with it. But I remember just having really bad professors who are they start their PowerPoint. You're like, okay, you're taking notes in the first slide. Like, all right, I'm following. Wait, what? The next slide is just completely like, and then there's this vector thing. And I remember I started out majoring in environmental science. I had this professor who did that sort of thing. I have a page of notes like before I dropped that major and switched to art for like a bunch of reasons. But like there was a page of notes that was just it like slowly devolved into a bunch of doodles. And I remember Vector Kitty was flying over the environment, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't have no idea what's even going on anymore. something.
Totally. Yeah, I think it was the worst teachers were the ones that didn't remember what it was like to not know the subject they're teaching.
Yeah.
And so they start talking, and to them, it's they've been doing it for 30 years, and like, yeah, this is old hat. I get this. You guys will get it too because it's really easy. But they don't remember 30 years ago when they're opening their first textbook, right?
Dude, it's surprising how quickly that sets in. Because so taking just a stupid video game as an example, in World of Warcraft, you have to learn boss fights. There's all these little mechanics you got to do, things you got to watch out for. It takes some practice, right? And before you have it down, it's freaking hard as hell. You're learning all these new patterns and tricks and things to watch out for. But once you have it down, it is super easy. It is barely an inconvenience, as they say. And so once people have beaten bosses and moved on to other bosses, all the time you see people saying, how is anybody stuck on this earlier boss? They're super easy. You just kind of blow through it. And like literally maybe 2 weeks ago, they were in the position of, oh my God, this is impossible. How will we ever do this? Because it's, everything is impossible until you know how to do it. And then it's just trivially easy.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how quickly you can flip from one to the other.
That's really hard it's hard to get in that mindset when you're a new learner as well. That's something that I've kind of been reading about and struggling with. Like when you're an adult and you're trying to learn a new skill, it's really hard to be in the position of I'm an idiot who knows nothing about this, like, I don't know, programming or art. I'm trying to teach art to people, and I think the sequence actually gets into this too, but the teacher also can get really frustrated with people who don't understand what seem like basic concepts to you. But like, there are things that seem like basic concepts to me because I learned them when I was a kid. Like I've been drawing forever.
Yeah.
And I remember trying to teach like some older folks at the library, like, okay, like here's how you draw a face, and not understand. Like that's another thing that's really funny. This describing the anatomy of a face was like, okay, you have to like, you do the oval, you divide the oval in half, that's where the eyes go, your eyes are halfway down your head. And like, I'm trying to explain like the cognitive things going on. I'm like, this seems unintuitive because most people look at faces and they don't look at the rest of the head. So
Yeah.
you think the upper third of the face has the eyes, but actually it's the middle of the head. You have to draw the whole head. That this part's covered with hair. No one looks at that part. But like even as I'm describing all this stuff and I'm trying to like go step by step as slow as I possibly can, I'm walking around the room and people are still drawing the eyes on the top of the forehead. And I'm like, no, bad.
She's like, look at me.
Bad human.
Where are my eyes? You know, are you going to put them up here? How weird would that look, right? Yeah, just bring it down. Yeah, it's. I think. I imagine. I mean, part of it. That sounds to me. That just sounds like a hard subject. Since I can't draw. Maybe I'd be a good art student because I know I suck at it. But I wouldn't be confident in my ability to do it right. Whereas other people, the part where it could be maddening. He uses the example a lot of like scientists trying to explain things to non-scientists, and how like simplest explanation is a magic word of power among scientists because they've been inculcated with the legendary history of science from Newton to Einstein, and it's like, so you hear a biologist say, oh, it's the simplest explanation, then a physicist who doesn't know biology can be like, oh, okay, I will add a lot of credence to that because we are also scientists.
They know how important that is.
Yeah, and so that's like the annoying part is when you give like a long explanation of something to somebody who's not in the field that you're propounding from. You know, evolution to a layperson might be a good example. Like you can explain everything, and they're like, okay, yeah, I think I'm following you. I think you're an idiot. I think you're wrong. It's like, okay, well then you weren't listening and you didn't follow because this couldn't be simpler, and you're the idiot. So it's that's not how I feel. I'm saying that inclination to feel that way makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's like very much. I think you get in this headspace easily of this person's an idiot and they're not listening to me, and the other person is thinking like this person thinks I'm an idiot and that I don't know like basic stuff. Because like the thing about drawing is that people think they know how to draw a face, and like, you know, even kids with crayons are usually drawing faces, and it's like I know how to do like eyes, nose, and mouth. You know, like come on, but like you don't. It's just so hard to get in that headspace. It's like actually you don't know this stuff.
Yeah,
you have to be really humble.
He says in the post that to a lay audience, it's the simplest explanation may be interesting, but that's hardly a knockdown argument. But from the biologist's perspectives, they can see how, you know, it might sound a little unintuitive, but when they reject evolution, even after they've had it explained to them that it's the simplest explanation, they're just idiots, and there's no point talking to them.
And it's clear, too, that this isn't what Eliezer means here either. He's saying that that's the feeling that one gets because they're expecting short inferential distances. Yeah. When you correct for that, then you no longer view the unable to follow you along layperson as an idiot. You're like, okay, I clearly didn't actually explain myself. That's why Richard Dawkins' book Explaining Evolution is, I don't know, 350 pages long and not 5. To somebody who has and even that, it could be twice as long if you wanted to explain. He probably does a bit. It's been years since I've read it, but like if you wanted to explain little things like here's why we value short explanations. Here's why we value replication. All of the foundations of science. If you wanted to dig into all of that, then the book could be much longer. But I think he probably does a bit. This is meant to be a top to bottom book. But that's my point. Is like you can explain evolution in 3 minutes, if not less, depending on who you're talking to. But if you're starting from scratch from somebody who has no idea what you're talking about, then sometimes you need 300 pages, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a. Go ahead.
Go on. Oh, okay.
Well, the joys of Skype.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I guess I was going to say that he also says that if people see you visibly attaching greater weight to an argument than is justified in the eyes of the audience at that time, then they also think you're crazy because, you shouldn't put that amount of weight on that evidence. So you have to go back and first explain why the evidence that you're about to explain is as weighty and important as you're about to, lay out with, and that takes explanation in itself. And so he's saying there's a very long chain, but you can't drop any hints that maybe you're working a dozen inferential steps away from the audience, or that you have special knowledge they don't, because then they think that you're condescending and arrogant.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like, trying to explain to somebody why astrology isn't a thing. And if somehow she believes in astrology, but we shared everything else in common, I could just be like, you realize every physicist on Earth thinks that it's bullshit, or knows that would bet their lives on it being bullshit. You would immediately change your mind. You're like, okay, if all the physicists who actually know everything there is to know about stars, or everything that humanity can know yet so far about stars, thinks that it doesn't, that the constellations don't impact my life, then I guess I'm wrong.
I think if I were to actually believe in astrology, I would first have to not know enough of physics to not care what the physicists think.
I don't know. People are really good at compartmentalizing.
Well, once you know that stars are giant gas balls and that they're so freaking far away, what else is there to know?
People are very good at compartmentalizing. I have religious coworkers who, spend their days like bioengineering cells.
Oh, God.
Don't these bioengineered cells look intelligently designed? It's like, yes, because we made them here in the lab. Fuck you. It's not the same, and you know it.
I think what this all comes down to is the punchline. At the bottom, he says, and if you think you can explain the concept of systematically underestimated inferential differences briefly in just a few words, I've got some sad news for you, which, first of all, is a reference to the fact that this entire post is pretty long, but also to the fact that it links to 3 other posts that he's made beforehand. And while he doesn't give it away in this, I think at this point it should probably be clear to most people that the purpose of the sequences and their, several Bibles length worth of word count is to bridge an inferential gap that he saw at the very beginning when he was like, here's the mass audience of everybody in 2006, and here is this conclusion I have reached. And I have to convince people of this, but oh my God, it's going to take a while. And this is a freaking impressive project that one person set about to bridge this massive inferential gap. Like just the fact that he thought he could do it is kind of amazing to me. And then the fact that he actually did it is just crazy.
I'm very impressed by people who try to do hard things. I get pretty frustrated when people I don't know. Generally, I dislike haters, like in any field, but especially when people who see themselves as critics are bad-mouthing like some artwork or project that someone has done, or like I'm like, okay, what have you made? It's generally.
Yeah. All right, I guess that is the sequences. I do want to point out that somehow we accidentally skipped over several dozen sequence posts to get to these. I'm not sure how that happened, maybe an accidental page down or something.
Oops.
So we're going to be backtracking quite a bit. And next episode, we will talk about the post's scientific evidence, legal evidence, rational evidence, and is molecular technology, quote, scientific? So we have skipped a few inferential steps to get here, but hopefully we can backfill them without too much trouble.